Let's hope it. There, we're live. Beautiful.
I love it.
I
It
know.
looks like we're further apart because of
Well, hey everybody. We're starting a little bit early this morning, and delighted to be here with Pastor Arden. We're kind of out in the bushes today, out in nature. Um, Hopefully, we're going to use the labyrinth as well as a way to kind of orient you on this celebrate summer solstice, the longest day of the year when the sun is out uh, in its fullest form, holding us all, shining light on us, challenging us. So we're going to do a little bit about summer solstice today. Also, it's been a really busy weekend. Father's Day, Juneteenth, so many things to kind of mark this weekend. So you can kind of settle in and pay attention to the way in which we honor the beauty and the grace of the sun. And for those of you who have a religious tradition that connect you to the Son of God, so to speak, that you also make that connection as well today. So as you start logging on, shout out to one another and tell us a little. Many of you might know Arden from years ago, but if you're not familiar with Arden Strasser, Arden, 6 feet away, safe social distancing outside. Tell us a little bit about who you are before we get started this morning.
Good morning, everyone. It's nice to be with you. Some of you I know. I worked with Pastor Dan here as pastor at Our Savior's Lutheran Church for about 6 years, from 2000 and on. And this place is, well, you were a big part of my life. And just being here is a little overwhelming because the building holds memories and of being with you. Since I moved, in 2006, my family moved to Zambia in Southern Africa. I served as a Lutheran missionary pastor there for 8 years, and we moved to New York City in 2014. I'm now pastor of St. Luke's Lutheran Church near Times Square, where a recorded service of me just finished. But I'm here when my family took a break. We needed to get out of the city and do it in a safe way, just to refresh and recharge. New York's been very intense for the past 3 months, so I'm delighted to be with you, and thank you for what you've been in my life. And for those of you who are new, you can trust me. I'm with him, and so he wouldn't have me on unless I'm safe. I'm safe material.
Yeah, he's safe material. He's not going to say anything that's going to completely conflict with the kind of vibe that we try to generate every Sunday. So
yeah, I'm just a little more wired. I'm an extrovert, and Pastor Dan's an introvert.
Yeah,
so
that's
we
true.
move a little differently in the world. So I get a little. I worked in Africa a long time too, so I'm a little more. I get a little more excited. But other than that, we love each other too much.
Yeah, that's very true. So welcome. I'm glad you're all here. I want to start this morning, if you will, trying to kind of center ourselves inside of the wonder and the almost the kind of sense of grace that is present for us in summer solstice. And that is a reminder that we all breathe together on this planet because the sun every moment collaborates with soil and trees and air and water to allow us this capacity to live. I mean, we are, and it is present for us in such a and that, if you think about the way in which early religions were formed, it was always in relationship to the natural world, and particularly probably this deep understanding of humans' relationships to the sun and to its capacity to provide food and air, the whole 9 yards, right? So this big, beautiful sun that's behind me in the labyrinth today has a deep, deep, deep history in our DNA as a connection to what we hold as sacred. So we want to pause today and kind of allow ourselves to be with this gift. And to do that, I'm just going to invite you to kind of settle into wherever you're at. Take a couple of deep breaths And then behind me is the labyrinth that we have on site. And I would invite you to kind of take yourself into that labyrinth, which is a metaphor for your journey through life, or even the entire unfolding or unwinding of life itself. Move in a moment of silence today, and then allow the sun that sits at the center of that labyrinth um, to kind of share its warmth and its energy and its wonder with you today, and have a sense of gratitude for this great gift that creates each and every day and each and every breath that we breathe together. So I'm going to get situated myself, and so is Arden. We'll just take a couple of deep breaths together, and let's just hold the silence, listen to nature outside, the wind in the air, uh, and journey into that space, that labyrinth space, with a sense of gratitude for a few minutes this morning. So breathe with me. This morning we are so mindful of the gift of every breath we take. And with every breath, we are bound to the sun and the trees, the water and the soil. There is being connected to a vibrant ecosystem that sustains all of life. Today, we are deeply grateful for that relationship, and we tend to it just long enough so that our hearts can be filled with a sense of gratitude for this gift of life that holds us all. So welcome. All right. Well, I'm glad you're here. I just wanted to share a little story. I had a dinner party, or at least a little party, with a couple nights ago, and we were chatting. They're deeply spiritual people. I love them dearly, and they're not traditional spiritual folks that are connected to institutional religions, but they're constantly paying attention to world, to others, and trying to understand the bonds and the connections and that emerges in that relationship. And so, if you will, you might think of them as like spiritual in a secular way. They're looking at the world and trying to understand how best to live in relationship to world. And I just adore the insights that they bring as they journey more deeply into that experience. And they were telling us a story that night that sometimes, ready for quieting down, one of them will be sitting and staring into the night sky, and they'll say, what does it all mean? What does it all mean? It's probably the deepest religious question that is ever asked. What does it all mean? And it reminded me particularly that since the dawn of humanity, humankind has always looked into the natural world and asked that very question, and formed a kind of sacred relationship with the natural world as they try to understand, what does this all mean? Soil, water, wind, sun, animal life, your own life, the way in which we interact with the natural world. distance. I'm reminded as we all struggle with COVID-19 that it too settles in the lungs, and that those who find themselves in a hospital starving for oxygen, if they could talk, they would say, I can't breathe. We all know we've created a culture with so much history of systemic racism that George Floyd, under the weight of that system, cries out, right, I can't find my breath anymore. What does all this mean for us? The ability to simply pause and tend to that question, particularly on the longest day of the year, summer solstice, where the sun invites us to pay attention for a full day to what's going on in the world. I think it's a great kind of opportunity for us to explore that very question. What does it all mean, and how do we live in relationship to one another, to the natural world, and to all that we hold as sacred? So when Arden and I were talking, I asked Arden, what do you think might be some of the kind of connections between this solstice moment and what we need to explore? So I'm going to invite Arden to share a few of his perspectives on the subject as well. And maybe he'll give you some insight as he sits in the sunshine and I in the shade about, how does sun invite, in a sense, revelation or new vision or challenge? So Arden, what do you bring to that, to the solstice moment together?
Well, I like the I like science very much. As you may remember, I used to be an engineer, and I like the thought that because our Earth doesn't rotate straight up and down with regard to the sun, but because it's at an angle, we get the seasons.
Yeah.
And because we get the seasons, we get new life. We get agriculture. We get farming. We get animals that have cycles, and today, the solstice, we are at an inflection point. Since December, the number of hours of sunlight has gone up and down, up and down, up and up and up. And today we got over 14 hours, almost 15 hours of sun. And then it will slowly begin to bring its way down until the next equinox. And that means today we get, in the northern hemisphere, we get the most sun we'll ever get in the year. And that made me think about what the sun does. It's an inflection point. An inflection point from where a curve changes from increasing to decreasing. And what is an inflection point in my life or in your life? That's what I'm interested in exploring.
Yeah.
Because I'm sitting in the sun and it feels a little uncomfortable because the sun's right on me, but that's actually what got me thinking about solstice, that too much is off-putting and it's uncomfortable. And maybe that's what our summer is going to be like, personally and socially, that it's a summer comfortable because the sun is on. Many cultures call this midsummer. Midsummer, there's many traditions around the world on midsummer, and it's a very optimistic holiday in many cultures, midsummer, June 21st. But Americans, we think this is the beginning of summer because we're very optimistic as well. But it's really midsummer.
Yeah.
Anyway, we're in we're in an unusual context this year that you may never experience in your lifetime. Those of us who are older have told me we've never gone through anything like this in our country. Our country can feel like it's cracking open. So many people, I've been living in New York City, so I don't know what it's been like here, but I can tell you what it's been like in New York City. It's been very intense. For 15 weeks, we just shut down. No one on the streets. It felt unworldly. And 2 weeks ago, cops came out of everywhere because of all the marches. I live right next to Times Square with my church, and there's marches, multiple marches every day. And some I participate in, some I can't. And there's two going on. There's police everywhere, and you can feel the tension. The city has just come back to life 2 weeks ago. People are starting to go to work. People are Globally, it's not over, and in our country, it's not over. The I'm angry at injustice in our country, and I know you are as well. I'm angry that children have to ask questions that they should not have to. Those of you who have kids, many of you are determined our country needs to change. Some of you feel a bit trapped. You know, on the news, there's always marches. It feels like our country is quaking with conflict, and you're a peacemaker. Pastors, we avoid conflict, generally speaking. And so this is it's an uncomfortable time to be seeing so much conflict around us. And the coronavirus itself is from nature, and yet it's going after us. Nature has this both-sided feel to it. It cares for us and holds us, and yet it can do this, and we're spinning. How did we come here? This we don't know the future. All of you, your 2020 is not turning like anything out like you thought it would. Hey, um, my agenda. This is not my plan for the summer. Some of us spend and getting and hiding in the shade, but I'm out of the shade. I'm stuck in the sun. And as much time as we hang out doing other things, we ought not get out of the sun. We ought to stay in the sun and want to see. America's original sin, our original sin is slavery. And we're still facing this and thinking it through. What does it mean? It's uncomfortable. Pastor David Losey writes that as a culture, American culture, we're not good at talking about things that involve loss or change. Maybe because we're eternally optimistic, we worship being young, think about our mortality, whatever it is, we don't to face the uncomfortable. But a good flashlight finds something that you can't see. And the sun is now at its longest and brightest. It's trying to help us see things that we don't want to see. And I want my sunglasses, but I ought not, because this is a God time. It's a God moment. It's got power, and we ought not step away into the shade to ignore what is going on around us. Jesus once said, "The truth shall make you free," and I've always wondered what that meant. You know, because I grew up with classical Christianity, and truth is a very complicated thing, and I think that it means the truth about who we are and what life is like. And right now, we're facing truths about I invite you to rethink and reconfigure and reorder what you thought was the frame of your life. Um, you've arrived at a new chapter. Let the sun crack open, not just the truths about our country, but also about your own life. Read a book this summer. Read a book about race, racism, or about the history of race in America. Just read one book. Make a decision about how you or your organization interact with people of color. Are they in positions of leadership? How are they economically invested? How are they involved in leadership positions? Just rethink how your organization is engaging the world. Is your business with all white-owned businesses, people of color? A shift is beginning to happen, and we need to run with it. I don't like seeing marches on TV every night, but what we have seen, the door has opened. You've seen things, and you and I have seen things. When we saw the murder of George Floyd, we've seen something that cannot be ignored. And let the sun shine for the truth to come out. That's the way. That's the journey I'm following. It's a spiritual journey. I mean, whether you are Christian or not, it's a spiritual journey, and it's scary, but it can be done, particularly when you have friends. And that's why you're here. You're part of a group of people that are trying to make a journey that counts. It's a spiritual community, and you have comfort and assistance and help from one another. The Spirit helps you. The Spirit that you know when you are together brings you consolation and encouragement. Be advocates for one another. When we go chit-chatting, do we talk about the weather? Well, the summer of 2020, the summer of truth. Thanks for the sun.
Thanks, Arden. Some beautiful thoughts to. I also noticed that it, begins to shed even more and more light on the labyrinth behind me, almost a metaphor for what Arden was talking about, right? We walk now this labyrinth in the time of year, this summer in particular. How do we let it kind of reveal or kind of shine in places that it has not shined before? There's just so much that we have to gaze into gaze into the lives of one another, into the complex culture, and then we ask the question like that couple asks as they stare into the night sky, what might this all mean for us? To me, that's the most spiritual question you can ask. That's the question Arden's asking you to play around with this summer as the sun continues to shine on us all. So for today, as we spend some time reflecting on this, the longest of days, as you reflect on the wisdom that Arden has brought us and the place of summer solstice, we hope for you that you too can feel both the warmth of the sun, but its revealing capacity too, its capacity to help us see more clearly, maybe into things that we've been ignoring or left in the shadows. No longer. No longer. Thanks for being a part of this morning, everyone. Journey into that labyrinth space. Feel your life winding through the capacity of sun to shine in your life, what will you see? What will you discover? It's a great question, isn't it? It's been an honor to have Pastor Arden with us this morning. We're going to get out of the sun in a moment and go have breakfast together somewhere. We will maintain our social 6-foot distance and do everything outside.
Thanks for wearing your masks.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
when you do this, you're saving lives. And I'm not exaggerating. In New York, if you see what it has done, people save lives by doing this. So this is not an idol. Don't get into politics. You're doing this because you care for one another. So thank you for, I've seen people around Lafayette. They're doing this. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Mine's over there. So to close out today, just to kind of since it's a Father's Day weekend as well, just a reminder, I was struck by the story of the prodigal, and Martin Morley's going to play a piece that reminds you of Father's Day. After this video is over, you can scroll down and check him out. I was reminded of the prodigal story, where a child who lives in right relationship to father, since it's Father's Day, wanders too far, gets into all sorts of trouble, into a mess. He's, in a sense, disconnected from the system that's supposed to hold him, right? He's out of the familial system. And at some point, he awakens to that reality and struggles to think, can I return? Can I find my way back to right relationship again? And as he hesitantly turns and begins his journey back, the father rushes out and embraces him again. And to me, that story is a reminder that whatever turning we're experiencing right now, as we turn and move our way back towards right relationship with each other, with nature, with self, maybe, like the gift of the sun that's always there to embrace us. So there's something about sacred spirit that invites us back as well. It's always present there. There's a statement in Islam that I love, that I use all the time. Allah says, if you take one step towards me, I'll come rushing towards you. A corner this summer. See if you're invited into some deeper sense of wholeness with yourself, with one another, and with the world as well. All right. Thanks for being a part of today. A couple of quick announcements from the OSLC community. Number one, to vote on our budget, course, on our new leadership for next year. Please, when you see that in your inbox, just sit down and do it right away. We need to get critical mass of people to kind of respond to that. In addition, in this week, Martin put together a survey to talk about what might it look like for us to gather together physically again in this space on the courtyard. What is your interest in that? Anyway, there's a survey there.